Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I decided to do a quick discussion about the adventure engine. And basically the question I'm posing myself is whether or not the engine is actually healthy for the game. And I figured I would do this video to just sort of spark a discussion with you because I really want to know your thoughts and opinions. I obviously have mine and I'll share them with you in this video, but please let me know down in the comments what you think and pretty much any kind of thought you have about the Brave engine. I really want to hear. I'll probably be using the adventure engine and the Brave engine name interchangeably because I'm used to it, so if I say the Brave engine, that's what I'm talking about. It's just the adventure engine, but with the previous name. So just to clear things up. Before we begin, I would like to encourage you to hop on my community tab and actually comment on my Q&A post if you want, of course, because I will be doing a follow-up Q&A. So if you have any kind of question for me, of course, drop it in the community post about the Q&A. So, of course, also subscribe if you still haven't. A lot of you are still not, and I would love for you to be part of this community. And with that being said, we can just go ahead and get started. So, firstly, I want to discuss what the engine actually provides for the cost of having those 9 cards or 10 cards with the illegal knight in your deck. So essentially what we're looking at is a negation and also a free body in the form of Enchantress, so a free level 3 body or just a free level 7 body because the Griffin Rider, of course, can be special summoned. And Illegal Knight is there as well, but we'll discuss Illegal Knight separately because I think it's actually one of the most fair cards in the engine. And you have the negate, you have the free body, you also have the free discard because if you look at the equip spell, of course it's going to get reattached if it gets sent to the graveyard, so it's a free discard. And also, if you're in a grind game and you just want to activate the Faithful, get the Enchantress, or maybe get with the Enchantress, if it's in the graveyard, you can go ahead and get right for any kind of free discard because if you're playing the Brave engine in any kind of deck that needs to discard, that's honestly busted because it's so free. And I've seen it actually come up a lot. If you look at the Dragon Link deck, for example, and you can go ahead and just discard anything that you maybe don't need. And if we stay on topic of the equip a bit longer, the equip itself is honestly probably the best card out of the entire engine. Firstly, it re-equips itself, so it's free. And secondly, going second is just such a strong card to push into a board. It's honestly insane. Like the actual engine, not only that it provides a negate, it also provides a form of disruption going second, and I think that's honestly a bit too good. And if we talk about the actual, I guess, cost that I mentioned before, you having to run 9 cards in your deck or 10 with Illegal Knight, that's really not an issue because if you look at the decks that actually run the Brave engine, most of them are going to be some kind of 1-card combos, or for example a deck that can just turbo into fiber, something like Dragon Link with a lot of extenders, and they go through their dragon plays and then they get to fiber and they get to the Rose Dragon stuff. And if you get to that, all of the other cards don't really matter. If a deck has enough space to run hand traps, then of course it's going to have enough space to run the Brave engine as well. And it's also so insane that you get to keep the negate at all times. That's what I think is the biggest issue. So if you go from the Griffin Rider into the Baron to, for example, trigger the Red Rose in the graveyard, that's having a negate and also having another body with the Rocks Rose Dragon and then another body with the Basil Rose Shoot, and you still have that negate, which may not be the Griffin Rider anymore, it's the Baron, but it's still the negate you got from the right or the Enchantress or anything that you went for at the beginning of your turn. So it's like honestly way too busted when you pair it up with a deck that's good in itself. And I get that you have the counter argument of some decks are maybe a bit too fragile and they do need that another form of, I guess, protection from Nibiru and stuff like that. But if we actually look at Nibiru, for example, shouldn't that be a card that's meant to keep you alive against a very busted combo deck? And it's very similar to something like an argument for Mystic Mine. Like, is Mystic Mine unhealthy, or is it just a way to deal with the board that you would inevitably lose against anyway? And I think it's pretty much the same when it comes to those like board breaking cards and just very strong cards and very high impact cards like Nibiru, like Dark Ruler, like stuff like that. And I honestly think engines like this just should not be printed, because at the end of the day, what it actually sort of impacts is also the fact that people don't really know how to deck build. And I think that's an issue in itself, because if you have something like a Brave engine where you really need to throw a lot of hand traps at the entire deck because of the Brave engine and its ability to negate your first thing, then how are you going to deck build? Are you going to go for a very heavy hand trap just line of a deck or build, or are you going to go for a board breaking type of deck or build? And for a couple months now, that has been an issue because people go back and forth on different kinds of builds, and there is a bit too much versatility in the format when it comes to the actual decks and its builds that you can expect at an event, because you really don't know how to deck build. And I'm pretty sure the Brave engine sort of impacted that with a lot of different things, but the Brave engine was among them for sure. And I would like to go back to the cost of the Brave engine we were talking about. I'm sorry if this video is a bit all over the place, but I haven't had this kind of discussion ever since my problematic cards video. So if it's a bit too all over the place, I'm sorry, but I just wanna throw all of my thoughts at you, so we have something to work with. You can respond, and I really encourage you to let me know. So what I wanted to say is, if we go back to the topic of sort of the cost of the Brave engine, the interesting thing is that if it's run in a deck that's inherently not that consistent, you having to run 9 or 10 cards to run the Brave engine seems a bit too much sometimes. So maybe this is like the first, I guess, negative thing that we have found, that it can break some decks, like hardcore break them. And for a good example would be the Virtual World deck. I've tried it, and I'm pretty sure many people did, but the engine just does not work because the deck itself is very inconsistent, and it just makes it way too bricky. For, you having a negate and all of that, yeah, it's nice, and you have the level 3 free body, but it's still not worth it. And then you look at something like the Phantom Knight deck, which still utilizes the Brave engine sometimes, but not every single build, because it's also one of those decks that if you do not build it perfectly, your hands are just going to be way too weird and too unplayable. So yeah, I guess that's something. Like, that's one good thing about the Brave engine, is that it's not that free in every single deck, but for the most part it is. And I also want to mention how I think the biggest issue is the amount of actual copies you have when it comes to Rite, when it comes to Enchantress, and when it comes to Foolish Burial, because this is another card sort of almost inside of that engine, because you need to run it for you to be able to Foolish the Water Enchantress. So you have 7 copies of Rite, and one Rite, and this is another issue I have with the engine, one Rite or one Enchantress for the most part is going to deal with a lot of disruptions from the opponent if the opponent is not playing a deck that's inherently as busted as this one is. If you have a deck that runs the Brave engine, has 1-card combos, for the most part your hand is going to look like that. You will have the Brave engine, one of the cards for the 1-card combo, maybe an extender, and something like a hand trap. So how is your opponent supposed to do anything if you legit go Rite and that forces out a negate or something? Or you go Rite, they use something like Salamangreat Roar, something that's inherently a very fair card. They negate the activation, and you go, okay, so Water Enchantress effect, fetch Rite effect, and then like bounce something with the Draco back, and effectively your engine just dealt with that. And yeah, I get that in this hand, I guess you had 2 copies of the Brave engine, so you only have 4 more cards to play with, but you're probably going to have at least 1 combo piece among those 4. And even if you don't, the engine in itself can keep you afloat, just because if you actually use the Draco back bounce, you still have the Griffin negate ready for your opponent's second turn. So it's like, from that point on, you're probably winning. And I also said I wanted to mention Illegal Knight. I think this card is honestly the fairest card out of the entire engine, and it's a really nice card, but it still doesn't really outweigh how busted the entire other part of the engine is. And the last thing I wanted to touch upon would be the actual price of the Brave engine. And a couple thoughts I have on that is the fact that if you look at something like a huge competitive setting, people will probably have that engine, whether it be they bought it or they borrowed it, but more than likely they will have it at something like a high tier level event. But if you look at something like a local or maybe a small regional setting, maybe not many people will have it because it is quite expensive. So I guess that's sort of an upside on one hand, but it really depends on the setting of the event you're going to. But on the other hand, I think the difference between the people having it and the people not having it is way too big for the engine to be considered healthy. Like if someone invests in it, more than likely they will win with it because it is going to give so much advantage to their deck. And I also get that people have sort of learned to counter it, but at the end of the day, even if you know what to do and you don't draw into your hand traps or your board breakers or however you want to build your deck, because like I said, it is impacting the deck building as well. If you don't draw into it, it doesn't matter if you know how to counter it. So I still think that I think the difference is way too big. And it shouldn't be like that. Maybe it would be different or interesting if it wasn't that expensive and a lot of people would have access to it. But I guess that's another topic and it's not going to happen like ever. So there's that as well. And yeah, for my closing thoughts, what I wanted to mention from the beginning and what I want to stress is that I don't think the engine itself is that unhealthy. But it has way too many copies of the actual good cards. So if some stuff will get limited, something like Enchantress or Right, I think that would be much more fair, but it would still be considered unhealthy because even if some stuff gets limited, I think people will still run it for the free bodies, the free discard, for the Draco Back Disruption going second, for everything. But I think that right now, when everything is still unlimited, it is definitely unhealthy and should probably be addressed sometime in the near future. Like it impacted so many decks, and I get that that's a plus, I guess, from one point of view, but I still don't think that's healthy and I don't think that's okay. And sometimes it honestly triggers me a bit when some engines get printed that seem way too busted. So I guess we'll see what happens and we'll see if it gets touched in any kind of way. But I just wanted to bring this video to you, to bring this discussion to you, because I want to know your thoughts and I want to know what you think, because the format is getting so diverse and so interesting. But there are still a couple things in the format that I think should be talked about and should be touched probably on the ban list. So yeah. I guess with that, I'll leave you with all of these thoughts. And if you liked the video, if you found it interesting or liked it, please like it and also sub to the channel. And yeah, let me know what you think. Check out all the social media and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.